Right now, somewhere on Earth, the ground is shaking. Not in a dramatic way, just a little tremor, a tiny ripple, something you'd barely feel through the soles of your shoes. And 500,000 times a year, that's all it is. Just the planet stretching. Nothing to worry about. But here's the thing. That same force once shook so hard, it buried an entire city of 1 million people while they slept. Every single one of them. In 35 seconds. And that's not even close to the worst it's ever been. Today, we're going through 7 levels of natural disasters, from the kind that barely makes local news, all the way to the kind that wiped out 75% of every species on Earth. Level 1 is basically nature's background noise. 500,000 earthquakes happen every year. Most of them you'd never know about unless you were watching a seismograph. Magnitude 2, magnitude 3. The planet's just doing its thing, rattling a picture frame, maybe cracking some plaster. The energy released in a magnitude 3 quake is roughly equal to a small conventional explosive. That's it. Then you've got your EF0 and EF1 tornadoes. Winds between 65 and 110 miles an hour. Sounds terrifying, right? But EF0 tornadoes killed a grand total of 25 people across the entire United States between 1950 and 2022. That's 72 years. You've also got dust storms, giant walls of sand, sometimes 1,500 meters high, sweeping across Arizona or Sudan. Visibility drops to 0 for 20 minutes. Then it passes. Life goes on. Level 1 is the stuff that makes you look out the window, maybe reschedule a picnic, and then completely forget about it by dinner. Nature is not trying right now. It's barely awake. Level 2 is when nature stops being annoying and starts being dangerous. Think Category 1 and 2 hurricanes, sustained winds up to 110 miles an hour, storm surges of 6 to 8 feet above sea level, and power outages lasting weeks, dozens to hundreds of deaths. Serious but survivable with warning. But not every Level 2 disaster kills with wind and water. Some of them just make the air itself lethal. In the summer of 2010, a massive high-pressure system stalled over western Russia and refused to move for weeks. Moscow recorded its hottest temperature in 130 years of measurement, 38.2 degrees Celsius. In July alone, the city's daily death count doubled, with about 700 people dying every single day. By the time it ended, approximately 55,000 people had died across western Russia, not from a hurricane or an earthquake, just from the air being too hot for too long. The heat wave also triggered thousands of wildfires, including forests still contaminated from Chernobyl. Smoke blanketed Moscow for weeks. The drought destroyed 20% of Russia's entire grain harvest, sending global wheat prices sharply higher, affecting people in countries that had never once checked Moscow's weather forecast. Level 2 doesn't just affect the people in the room. The ripples go far. Level 3 is when history changes. September 8, 1900, Galveston, Texas. A Category 4 hurricane makes landfall with a storm surge of 15 to 16 feet above sea level. The problem? Galveston Island's highest point was only 8.7 feet above sea level. The entire island went underwater. At least 8,000 people died, possibly 12,000, in one day. That's still the deadliest natural disaster in American history by a wide margin. 1 in 4 residents of the city was gone by morning. 6 years later, on April 18, 1906, at 5:12 in the morning, a magnitude 7.9 earthquake ruptured nearly 300 miles of the San Andreas Fault. 45 to 60 seconds of violent shaking. Half of San Francisco's population, 225,000 people, were left homeless overnight. The earthquake broke every water main in the city. Then the fires started. They burned for 3 days and consumed 490 city blocks. 28,000 buildings gone. The fire was so intense that it created its own weather. Then, in 1980, Mount St. Helens in Washington state gave America a preview of what a real volcano looks like. A magnitude 5.1 earthquake triggered the collapse of the volcano's unstable bulge into the largest debris avalanche in recorded history. The lateral blast that followed reached speeds of up to 670 miles an hour, possibly briefly exceeding the speed of sound. The energy released was equivalent to 26 megatons of TNT, 1,600 Hiroshima bombs. 57 people died, a number that, compared to what comes next, starts to feel almost merciful. Level 3 events reshape cities, end eras, and generate entire new fields of science. They are the disasters written into history books, but they are survivable. The societies come back. Level 4 is where that stops being guaranteed. December 26, 2004, Boxing Day, 7:58 in the morning off the coast of Sumatra. A magnitude 9.1 earthquake, the third largest ever recorded, ruptured 1,300 kilometers of seafloor. The ocean floor was uplifted by 6 meters along that entire length. The shaking lasted 8 to 10 minutes. Most major earthquakes last 30 to 60 seconds. In the deep ocean, the tsunami waves were only 60 centimeters tall, but they were moving at 500 to 800 kilometers an hour, as fast as a commercial jet. As they hit shallow water, they slowed down and reared up. In Aceh province, Indonesia, waves reached 51 meters. That's a 17-story building made entirely of water moving at full speed toward the shore. 227,899 people died in 17 countries, the deadliest tsunami in recorded history, and there was no Indian Ocean warning system. Had the Pacific's warning infrastructure existed there, estimates suggest 80,000 of those deaths in India, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, where the wave arrived hours after the earthquake, could have been prevented. And then there's Haiti. January 12, 2010, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake occurred 13 kilometers below the surface, directly under Port-au-Prince. 35 seconds. 60% of Haiti's entire administrative and economic infrastructure collapsed. 80% of schools. More than half of all hospitals. Total damage equivalent to 120% of Haiti's annual GDP. The first time in 35 years of disaster economics that a single event exceeded a country's entire annual output. The country didn't just suffer, it was structurally broken. Level 4 events don't just kill people, they end a nation's ability to recover for a generation. At level 5, we stop counting in hundreds of thousands and start counting in millions. The summer of 1931, China. The Yangtze, Yellow, and Huai rivers, the three great river systems of central China, flooded simultaneously. 9 cyclones passed through in July alone. The historical average is 2 per year. 180,000 square kilometers went underwater, an area the size of England and half of Scotland. Major cities including Wuhan and Nanjing were submerged. At least 25 million people were directly affected. Some estimates say 53 million, but the floods were just the beginning. The crops they destroyed condemned millions to starvation over the following months. Cholera, typhoid, typhus, bodies floating back with every tide. Total deaths, somewhere between 2 and 4 million people. One of the deadliest natural disasters of the entire 20th century, and most people have never heard of it. July 28, 1976, 3:42 in the morning, Tangshan, China. A city of 1 million people asleep. A magnitude 7.6 earthquake strikes. Tangshan sits on deep sandy alluvial soil, the kind that liquefies during intense shaking, making buildings sink and topple like they're standing in quicksand. In minutes, 85% of buildings collapsed. All water, electricity, and communications failed simultaneously. The Chinese government kept the death toll secret for 3 years. When they finally released figures, the official count was 242,419, but early estimates from other sources ranged from 650,000 to 800,000. In 7,218 households, every single member of the family was dead. The government refused all foreign aid. Level 5 is the scale at which a disaster destroys the very systems needed to count its own victims. Level 5 is still just a regional catastrophe. At level 6, the whole world feels it. August 27, 1883, the Sunda Strait, Indonesia. The third explosion of that day at 10:02 in the morning remains the loudest sound in recorded human history. It was heard clearly in Perth, Australia, nearly 3,000 miles away. The acoustic pressure wave from the blast circled the entire globe more than 3 times. 2/3 of the island of Krakatoa was simply gone in a matter of hours. The collapse triggered tsunamis as high as 41 meters that swept coastal Java and Sumatra and destroyed 165 settlements. Of the 36,000 people who died, more than 31,000 were killed not by the volcano itself, but by the water that followed it. Ash fell 2,500 kilometers away. Human skeletal remains were found on rafts of floating volcanic pumice washing up on shores across the Indian Ocean for months afterward. But what made Krakatoa the world's first truly global news event wasn't just its scale, it was timing. By 1883, the worldwide telegraphic network had just been installed. News of the eruption was broadcast instantly across the globe. For the first time in history, people in London, New York, and Sydney knew about a disaster in Indonesia within hours of it happening. Krakatoa didn't just reshape the physical world, it reshaped how the world communicated about disasters. For all its destruction, Krakatoa was only a VEI 6. There was something bigger. April 10th, 1815. Mount Tambora, Indonesia. The largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. VEI 7. Classified as super colossal. 10 times larger than Krakatoa. 100 times larger than Mount St. Helens. 10 billion tons of material blasted into the stratosphere. The eruption column reached 43 kilometers high. The sound was heard 2,600 kilometers away. Ships in the region thought they were under artillery attack and went to investigate. The top third of the mountain was simply gone. The Tamboran people, an entire culture, an entire language were wiped out. Their language left no written record. It is completely extinct. But the local catastrophe wasn't the civilization-altering part. What Tambora blasted into the stratosphere was tens of millions of tons of sulfur dioxide formed a global aerosol veil, a thin, persistent layer of sulfuric acid circling the planet, blocking sunlight. Global temperatures dropped by 0.4 to 0.7 degrees Celsius. That sounds small. It was not. 1816 became known as the year without a summer, killing frosts in New England in every month of the summer, snow in Albany, New York in June, 46 centimeters of snow in Vermont in June, virtually every agricultural crop in North America destroyed. Europe, the same. Failed harvests, famine, food riots in France, Britain, Switzerland. And then, thousands of kilometers from the volcano, a group of writers was stranded indoors in a gray, dark, cold summer at a villa in Switzerland. Out of boredom and the strange oppressive atmosphere, Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Her companion, John Polidori, wrote The Vampire, the ancestor of every vampire story ever told. Lord Byron wrote his dark poem, Darkness. J.M.W. Turner painted those famous, lurid red sunsets that still hang in galleries today. All of it downstream from one volcano in Indonesia in 1815. Level 6 doesn't just kill people, it rewires civilization, what people create, what they fear, how they talk to each other across oceans. But even Tambora and Krakatoa are a 6, because there is a level above this, and it makes both of them look like a sneeze. 74,000 years ago, Sumatra, Indonesia, a supervolcano erupted, the Toba event, VEI 8, the maximum rating on the entire scale. 2,800 cubic kilometers of material ejected. Mount St. Helens ejected 1.3 cubic kilometers in 1980. Toba was over 2,000 times larger. Ash covered virtually all of India, at least 10 to 15 centimeters across the entire subcontinent. The volcanic winter dropped global temperatures by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. A glacial period followed that lasted approximately 1,000 years. And here's the part scientists still argue about. There's a theory, the Toba catastrophe theory, that the eruption was so severe it reduced the entire human population to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Every human alive today, all 8 billion of us, descended from a tiny surviving group huddled in isolated pockets of equatorial Africa. Our genetic similarity, the reason humans from different continents look far more alike than different populations of great apes, may trace back to a near-extinction bottleneck caused by a volcano. The science is debated. Some sites show human continuity before and after the ash layer. Some geneticists argue the timing doesn't perfectly align. But what is not debated by anyone is that Toba was the largest volcanic eruption in the entire history of our species. And the question of whether we would survive it was genuinely on the table. And then there's the event that didn't just threaten one species. 66 million years ago, the Yucatan Peninsula, an asteroid 10 to 15 kilometers wide, formed in the outer solar system beyond Jupiter, moving at 40,000 kilometers an hour, 30 times the speed of sound. It struck the Earth. The energy released was equivalent to 100 million megatons of TNT, a billion times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb, in the same order of magnitude as a small stellar explosion. The impact vaporized the asteroid and enormous quantities of Yucatan bedrock instantly. A fireball expanded at supersonic speed. Seismic waves equivalent to a magnitude 10+ earthquake rolled through the entire planet. Mega tsunamis hundreds of meters tall swept the Gulf of Mexico. Molten rock was blasted into orbit, then rained back down as superheated projectiles, triggering wildfires across Earth's surface. Simultaneously, across the whole planet, the dust, soot, and sulfate aerosols block sunlight globally for at least 1 to 2 years. Photosynthesis, the process every food chain on Earth depends on, essentially stopped. Global temperatures drop by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius or more. 75% of all species on Earth went extinct. Every non-avian dinosaur, every mosasaur, plesiosaur, ammonite, most ocean plankton, every large land animal weighing more than about 25 kilograms, gone. The main extinction interval lasted approximately 5,000 years. Full ecosystem recovery, approximately 10 million years. The only survivors were small mammals, burrowing creatures, crocodilians, sea turtles, and some birds. Life that could hide, wait, and endure in a world that had essentially gone dark. And here is what that tells you about nature's disasters at their absolute worst. Even the event that killed 75% of all species on Earth, the single most destructive thing to ever happen on this planet, did not finish the job. Something always survives. Something always finds a way through the dark. So when people talk about natural disasters as forces that could end the world, they're not quite right. The world has already ended once, by almost any definition of the word, and it came back. See you in the next one.